Now I would like to have some of this detail coming up here as well, just under the chin, and maybe also have some on the arm and on the waist. For sure we will need this. So let's start with the waist. I'm going to copy that shape and also the t-shirt shape. So both of these together, put them on the shading layer, and then using the shape builder tool, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and remove the details that I don't need. So we end up with this little triangle here. Again, we can remove the fill color from this and then choose draw inside, then use the brush tool. And to make sure that we use the same color that we established here, I'm just going to save that into the swatches panel. There it is. I'll put it next to the other color, just so we can see these were the two that we use for the skin tones. And then coming back to this shape here, if I use the brush tool, I can start adding the details. I'm going to zoom out a bit, and this time I'm actually going to use this thicker brush. So we were just going to draw down like that, and I feel like that's already looking quite good. Maybe it can be from this angle, or let's try it from the other angle like that. Yeah, I feel like something subtle will work. Yeah, something like that. So I don't want it to blend into the t-shirt too much, but we can see without the shading and with the shading. So we already have quite a good amount of detail added, once again, before and after. But let's just keep going. I'm going to do the same thing here with the arm. Now you might recall that the arm was actually already turned into a clipping mask when we were adding the bracelets. So for this to work, we will have to find this first. And sometimes when you work with clipping masks, the easiest way to select an object is to actually use the direct selection tool. Click on the edge, and then you can use this little magnifying glass icon here in the layers panel to jump down to the object. So there's our clipping path. So we are going to use this, and I just clicked on the circle to make sure the whole path is selected, and then shift click on this other shape as well, which we will need. Copy these two, and then come back up to our shading layer, select that, and press Command or Control F to paste these two parts in. And just so we can see these together, I'm going to change their fill color as well. So there's the two shapes, and then I'm going to use the shape builder tool, Shift M, a keyboard shortcut to quickly access it. And then holding down Alt or Option, we can remove these bits here because we only need the arm. So now that's selected, we can set the color to none to remove the fill color, and now using the draw inside option, we can paint over this again with the brush tool. Just zoom out a bit. Let's try to draw with the brush. I'm going to use this other brush, and I feel like it's too thick, so I'm going to reduce the thickness. Let's try again. It looks better, and we just need to use the same color for this. So let's just select that shape that we created, and we want the stroke color to be set to this darker shade of skin tone. Okay, let's just draw one more line here, maybe one more running down there, and yep, that looks quite nice. So let's click away and press Shift D to get out of this draw inside mode. So once again, before shading, after shading. And while I'm doing this, I just remember that these two fingers can also be set to the darker color. And of course, they should be behind the other shapes. So let's just move them all the way back like that. Now it's time to add the shading under the chin. So for the neck area right here, for this we will actually need a couple of shapes. First of all, remember we have the ear on a separate layer. We have the head, the neck, and the hair. So we select all of these shapes by holding down the Shift key and then copy them all onto the shading layer. So there we have everything placed in, and I'm just going to add the different color on them just so we can see them better. Then using the shape builder tool, we can start subtracting everything that we don't need, and that's holding down the Alt key and painting over all of these details. So now we got the shape that we wanted to work with, and now we can just remove the fill color from it And having this shape selected, I can go into the draw inside mode. And then to save time, I'm going to use the layers panel and select one of the previously used brush strokes. Then switch to the brush tool and just start painting from the right side. So this way I will use exactly the same settings that we had here. Very quick and easy way to go back to a setting that you prefer to work with. And you can see what I'm doing here is trying to build up the shading from the chin and the hair, because these are the two objects that cast the shadow. So I want it to be more intense around here. That's like the strongest section of the shading. And maybe just one more there around the neck. Okay, so let's see this from a distance. Again, we can see without the shading and with the shading. It looks quite nice and it defines the shape of the head much better. But now I also feel like I want to adjust the shape of the nose and the mouth a bit. So I'm going to lock the shading layer and I unlock the lines layer. So I actually want the nose to be slightly in front of the glasses, like that. And also the mouth, I think, can come a little bit this way. Can make it a slightly bit smaller. And then let's just zoom back. And yeah, I feel like that's a bit of an improvement there. Just very subtle, but it feels more natural. And also I feel like the chin can be refined a bit. I'm just going to use the direct selection tool and drag this out a bit. I want a little bit more of an angle here compared to how it was before. So it was there before, it looked too round. Now I feel like the structure of the head reads better this way. And maybe even this point can come inside a bit. So if I drag that down a little bit, it will read a bit better. Yeah, I feel like that looks a bit better. Just subtle little improvements. I keep noticing these things as I go along. And like I said before, don't be afraid of adjusting your sketch at any point. And now I'm just going to continue doing the same thing, adding a few more shading details. Some I will need here on the hand and some around the ankles. So let's do this quickly. I'm going to select this shape right here. We will also need this shape, and let's just use that shape as well at the same time. Let's copy all of this onto the shading layer. I will just make sure it's unlocked, paste them in, and then let's just set them to a different color that will stand out. Use the shape builder tool and delete the bits that we don't need. Now remove the fill color, select a previously used shape from the layers panel, and then selecting these two shapes from the layers panel with shift clicking on the circles. We will need to combine these into a compound path. That's object menu, compound path make, or command or control 8 is the shortcut. So this creates a single shape from them. This is just to allow using the draw inside mode while both of these objects are selected. Since they are not connected to each other, we had to use the compound path option. Now I can choose draw inside, and then I'm just going to quickly select one of the previously used shading details. So my brush tool is loaded with the settings, and then I'm just going to draw here from top down, just filling this in. I don't want to go over the trainers, so I'm careful not to do that. I will draw to the side a bit, like this. Maybe switch to the other brush as well to fill in a bit more thicker detail here, like that. And then the same thing here. That looks actually really good already. So I will turn off the shading. And now we just need to do the arm. So some shading here at the bottom. And since this is already in the shading layer, we set this up before when we created the shading up here. We just have to select the clipping path that was generated and then go back into the draw inside mode. Now select one of the shading details from up there, use the brush tool, and then let's paint over here at the bottom. One line, another one, and then one more maybe with this other brush, like that. Okay, so that was just a very subtle little detail there. We can zoom out and see how this looks. I'm quite happy with how the shading details turned out. So we can take a look again without the shading and with it. It added depth, but in a very subtle way. So I don't like to overdo shading because it can distract from the illustration itself. Again, let's see without the lines and the shading and put them back together. So it really helps to make the illustration pop. And this should be visible even from a distance. I also like to do this, just zoom out and remove and add those details back again. And that's why it's worth spending some time setting up the shading on a separate layer and also the lines, so you can really judge it at a later point whether they improve the illustration or not. Of course, it's always easier to work in a single layer, it's faster, but it won't allow you the flexibility to go back and make changes. Like for instance here, if I wanted to, I could still select all the lines together and I could set them up much thicker than before. And yeah, that's just something you won't be able to do as easily if you had everything on the same layer to begin with.